Okay. After we have been trained sufficiently in our nutritional concepts and the laws that govern the human mind, we call this health in the human mind. And after we're trained in that sufficiently, which is the most important foundation stone of the pyramidal structure that we're dealing with, once we get that health in the human mind under our belts, now remember, this is the most important part. If we don't get that, we will not be able to apply satisfactorily the techniques of body electronics. Many people say, I don't want to fool with all that mental nonsense. I want to get right down to point holding. Well, let me say this, it's a very dangerous game, because if they don't know what the point holding is going to bring up, because this is such a powerful technique, it's the most powerful technique on the face of the earth today, and if people don't know how to handle it, they're certainly going to mishandle it, and people are going to be hurt over it. Therefore, we want to understand that we are not here to elicit pain by pressing a point. We're here to trigger the release of that pain which is locked into the tissue, which the person is able to lovingly and willingly experience at their own rate of speed, and not due to trauma which is inflicted on a person irresponsibly. This is wherein, on the point holding, we need to understand the healing crisis, we need to understand the nutritional factors, we need to understand what's going on with the nutritional factors and the healing crisis, so that we have an understanding of that. A little knowledge, my friends, is a very, very dangerous thing. And we don't want to hurry into point holding until we get the basics well understood. So your job then is to educate people, educate people, educate people, and not just tell them, come on, I want to hold your points. You have a stroke, I want to get your feeling and nerve supply back, I want to hold your points. Nonsense. Let them ask, let them come at the door, let them get their training first, and then after they have their training and they're on a good nutritional program for a week or two, then we'll worry about holding points, and then we'll get the results because they know what to expect. Now, on this point holding business then, you don't start out with that. What should be done is a person should go to somebody who's fully trained, not in iridology, but in iris sclera integrated diagnosis, so that they see the iris of the eye is only half the eye. The sclera is the other half. And if people are not trained in the sclera as well as the iris, they're not going to be able to give a complete diagnosis. So we need to have good training for people in this area, and those people then can read the iris, put them on a nutritional program, put them on a body electronics flow sheet program, and then the person's on their way. Then when we start holding points, we're holding points with knowledge and confidence. Now the first point that we hold is a point which is approximating GB20 on the back of the neck. It has to be held a certain way to get the results. If it's not held that way, or you're off 1/4 of an inch, you don't get the results you're looking for. So with this point holding on this, what we call the STO point, S standing for sternocleidomastoideus muscle, T standing for trapezius muscle, and O standing for occiput, is actually between those two muscle systems, pointing inward and upward a certain way, and it's right below the occiput, about, maybe 5/8 of an inch. So you're not touching the skull. You're moving in very close to the spine, but between those two muscle systems, but moving in close to the spine below the occiput. Now, by holding that particular point properly, which you'll learn how to do, you find that with a stroke patient, for example, their arm is all up in a claw, their legs, they're dragging around with them, they're having a hard time expressing themselves verbally. After the person is nutritionally prepared, as we had mentioned before, and they're having their points held properly, suddenly the nerve supply is restored down through the arm and the leg, and they're able to walk again, they're able to move their arm again, and they're back to full normal activity. Unless there has been brain damage, which will take a little longer to reconstruct, but it will reconstruct in time as we get the nerve supply and circulation into that area, and the person is able to re-experience the traumas which may have been involved in association with the stroke. Some of these take a little while, but most of them come back very, very quickly after the first 2 or 3 point holdings. They're feeling wonderful, and they're able to move again, which they couldn't before. They're able to talk again, which they couldn't before. The same thing is true with MS. People are around on their crutches or their wheelchairs, and their legs are numb, their hands are numb, they can hardly move, they can hardly talk. And they say it's the destruction of the myelin sheath, which helps with synaptic transmission and so on. Now, we know that when the points are held properly, all the feeling, the nerve supply, comes back down into the tissues, and the person has feeling in just a matter of an hour or two, where before they had no feeling. And all of that with just a little gentle pinch test, where it'll be an ouch, before they didn't feel a thing. With either stroke or with your MS or with any type of shock to the body where there's a lack of feeling, people who've had operations or their bodies come out fairly numb and they just don't feel any sensory feeling again in some areas. Now, with the point holding, this brings it back. With the point holding, and there's probably more than 1,000 points, we use about 200 points basically, but with some points you use on an individual only once, like from an acupuncture text, but it applies directly to them. And then a year later, you'll never use it. Maybe once in a lifetime you'll use it. But this point holding is quite involved, and it just doesn't happen where you hold this point and everyone gets well. It's not like taking a pill and you're well type of thing. It's an ongoing thing to rebuild the body, the function of the mind, the control of the emotionality, so people can live normal lives. So this point holding here is exceedingly important. But with that comes regeneration of tissue, rebuilding of structure, and, shall I say this, to the happiness, constructiveness, forgiveness, and love of people so that they can learn to live this type of a normal life. Now the question may arise about point holding. What can you do for a sore back, or what can you do for a curvature of the spine or calcifications in the spine? Let me point this out as gently as I can. In all cases where there has been spinal injury that has been suppressed below the level of consciousness, when we're able to tap into the source of the pain that's locked into the tissues, and we release that from that little calcification, which we call the computer chip full of stored memory, when that's released, then we re-experience and release with love and forgiveness the pain that's locked in there, and then the spinal injury corrects itself. Now, this is hard for a lot of people to understand, but I'm just simply telling you the truth. We fix broken bones, and the broken bones in some cases can be fixed very, very quickly, in a matter of seconds in some cases. And we had a seminar here in Melbourne, Australia, where this one gentleman, for a number of years, I think about 19 years, I believe, he had a bone that didn't heal properly, where when he takes his hands, he could only take his left hand and hold it about a 45-degree angle, according to his own words, because this bone in his wrist and above his wrist had never healed. I went and felt that, and there's a big ridge across the bone structure where it had never healed properly. I simply took and held that for about 30 seconds, and he went through the trauma of how he had hurt it when he was about 14, I believe, years of age. And this thing straightened out noticeably to him and to me. And after it was over and done with, the bones, now he can take his hands and hold them out like this, normally. Now, here's where we can heal old calcifications on old broken bones that haven't healed properly, broken leg bones that haven't healed properly. And when those heal properly and the body returns to its full normal function and capacity, we're home free. Now, this is important for you to understand, is the body regenerates and heals. Your back problems, where a person has a curvature of the spine related to some old injury of falling off of a truck or something, then when we are able to release that trauma, the spine will straighten out. The calcifications in the spine will dissolve, so that then with a good, competent osteopath or chiropractor or naturopathic physician who's trained in manipulation, We can take those bone structures and manipulate them right back into position without doing a lot of damage to the tissues by a forceful manipulation, which everyone abhors. But just a gentle manipulation, the bones go into place and everything is fine. Now, here is where it's important that if the calcifications are, let's say that we have a vertebrae that's really out, and it's twisted and pinching a nerve, and it's all calcified so we can't adjust it properly. Okay? If we dissolve the calcification that's locking that into a subluxated position, and then that is able then to move back into place with an adjustment, then that releases the pinched nerve to a certain organ of the body, and then that organ is capable of having the nerve supply and circulation restored to that organ, and then it begins to heal. Now, this is such an important thing that we're dealing with. We simply cannot let this thing go by without people taking notice of it. Now, the problem is, for the professional, is it takes a long time. But for the permanent healing of the patient, this is what we're looking for, and not just a quick fix where 5 minutes you're into an office and 5 minutes later you're out. We want something that's going to permanently heal the person, shall we say, which will help them to permanently heal themselves. Because we're not waving a magic wand over anybody, we're helping them to heal themselves through the application of the laws of love, light, and perfection, which we're teaching in our extensive seminars.